Hey everyone, back for another live stream on this fine Monday afternoon. So didn't get the opportunity to stream last week. Essentially just absolutely up the walls with work, so didn't have the opportunity to do anything on Retrosumo. So this week, back into the fray and excited to start working on the project once more. I'm just going to bring up my chat windows there real quick. Again, rushing as usual, so haven't had the time to get set up in advance of the stream today, so just give me 1 second. Cool. Not that it matters too much because we never really have anybody in the chat anyway. But what are you going to do? So today, there's a few things that I want to do with Retrosumo. The first thing I'm going to try and do is get a new screen added in for allowing users to edit their profile. A big part of this is going to be adding a new field for users where they can upload their avatar. So one of the, I suppose, weaknesses with the project in its current state is that we don't have any user avatars, which means that our updates that show up and our posts that show up are pretty, like there's no real visuals to them. So we're going to get a basic file upload functionality put in place to allow people to upload an avatar. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to give consideration to fallback avatars. So if a user doesn't have an avatar uploaded, let's see, can we generate one for them that will do as a placeholder until they get the opportunity to upload their own. We'll then start looking at the posts that we have in place already and making sure that we're showing the user's avatar on those posts. Before the kind of last couple of things that I'd like to do today, time permitting, is add a couple of additional fields to that edit profile screen. These are fields that we're not probably going to be using for anything specific just yet, but that will become important over time, and that's user time zone. So what time zone the user is in, as well as their language. So we'll obviously come back to that type of thing later on where if we're showing dates, for example, or if we're allowing people to schedule posts for the future, obviously they'll need to be able to select it based on their own time zone. And similarly with language, if we intend on putting any UI functionality in place, like all of our common labels and stuff like that would need to be available in multiple languages at some point in the future. So getting that stuff put in place is important. So let's try and plan for the future and put that in right now. So that's the plan for today. So I'm going to switch over to my desktop and let's jump right in. So I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code. And okay, let's see. Where did we leave off the last day? We've quite a lot of stuff in here, which is in our post screen. So let's get the application up and running. So we are saying npm run watch, which should start Laravel mix. So I think the last time I streamed, I left off by adding a new feature to allow you to view an individual post, and that included building in React Router to have a separate route for individual posts. And if I remember correctly, you clicked on the timestamp and it would bring you to that route, and then if you reloaded the page, you're still on that route and so on, right? So that's pretty nice. But today we're not going to be focused over. Oh yeah, that was the other thing that we added last time, was we put in this like logged out view where you're obviously not logged in as anybody, so you can't like manipulate any post. You can't post a new post, for example, but you can log in, and the login still brings you back to that old kind of Bootstrap styled default scaffolding for Laravel applications, which is fine. But then once you're logged in, obviously you get the option to post, and on any of your own posts you can edit and you can delete them as well. So what we're going to focus on today is adding a couple of things. The first is we want to have an avatar show up anywhere that we show a user. So on each of these posts, and indeed in the drill down screen, we want to show an avatar for the user in there. And then obviously we need a way for the user to be able to upload their avatar. So we're going to have an edit profile screen. Now, we're probably at the point where a nice thing to do would be to have, instead of this logout link up here, to have like the user's avatar or their name or something up here and have that as a drop-down menu. And then within that drop-down menu, have an option for edit profile and logout. For the purpose of today, I don't want to get too bogged down in building like a drop-down menu with Tailwind. I know Adam Wadden has like a pretty extensive series of live streams where he builds a drop-down menu using Vue and Tailwind, which would certainly serve as an inspiration for how I would probably go about it here. But I think that would, like, based on what I've seen from Adam on that, it would probably take a stream or two to get through it. And it would pretty much be the same as what Adam is doing. So let's not focus on that right now, and perhaps there'll be a package or something that we'll be able to pull in that will help with that anyway. So for now, I'm just going to add like a my profile link alongside the logout link up here on the top navigation bar that will bring you to that edit profile screen. So yeah, within there, then we're going to have the option to upload an avatar, and we'll add a couple of extra fields then towards the end of the hour. Okay, so let's jump right in. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is for every user that we have, we're going to want to allow the user to upload an avatar. So we're going to need to store that somewhere. Now, if I'm future-proofing, I'm probably thinking we don't really want to have like a column on the user's table with their avatar path, because it could obviously be, we could have all sorts of images being uploaded into the platform. But my view on this, and particularly with this project, is that we're going to basically implement the minimum viable feature as we go along, and where we start adding functionality that's building on top of existing functionality, we're going to refactor that. So for now, I think like building in an avatar, the simplest way to build in an avatar is just to add that column. So let's just go ahead and do that rather than trying to focus too much on what we might need from an images perspective over time. So I'm going to, there's two ways that I could do this. I mean, I could create a new migration to amend the users table and add the avatar path as an update or as an alter to an existing table, or I could instead basically go and change the existing create users table. And because this project isn't live and hasn't been deployed anywhere yet, I have the luxury of being able to like destroy and rebuild the database entirely. And I don't want to get in the habit of creating like dozens of migrations for amending existing tables like before I even deploy the product for the first time. So let's change the existing one. So what I'm going to do is keep it pretty simple. I'm going to create a new text column called avatar path, and it's going to be nullable on the users table. So we'll just keep it to that for now. And if we, PA migrate. Okay, I'm actually going to create an extra, let me see, an extra shortcut here. So you'll see I've got path for PHP Artisan Tinker, path for PHP Artisan. I'm going to say PHP Artisan Migrate is PAM. And path is going to be PHP Artisan Migrate Fresh. I don't know, did I create any seeders before? So let's have a look. I don't think so. Yeah, so we don't have any seeders in place just yet. So do we want to go and create one? We probably do, actually. Otherwise, I'm going to have to recreate my user every time. Unless I've added that in. No, I could. What I could do is actually add the user here. Then that would be run in production as well. Do I really want that? Probably not. Let's just go and add in here app. Actually, do you know what? Factory app user. Nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to just create the user as and when I need it for now, and we'll come back and change that later. So what I need to do here is, if I reload my ZS-HRC file, I can now say PHP Artisan Migrate, which will migrate new migrations, or I can say PAF, which will basically drop all tables and rebuild the database. Now the problem with that is, when I come in here now, it's logged in, which is interesting. But if I try to log in again, it should fail. Yeah. So then I can say PHP Artisan Tinker, I can say factory app user create, email is Joe. Actually, let me see. I thought I did something on this. Maybe I just changed the factory to be a bit more practical. Nope, I didn't. Okay, I should definitely do something about that because I'm going to be tearing this down and rebuilding it quite a lot. Just got a note there that the video quality is at the potato level. Interesting. So I actually changed the stream settings between my last stream and today to try. So one of the things that I noticed the last time was that I was broadcasting in 720p and my recordings were obviously not at a, like I'd like to have 1080p recordings up on YouTube. So yeah, so I bumped up some settings hoping that that would actually allow me to record in 1080p. Let me just have a quick look and see what it looks like for me on Twitch. I wonder, so Paul has mentioned that it's particularly bad on Periscope, so I'm wondering, is it just a Periscope thing? Yeah, I mean, on Twitch, for me at least, it's looking pretty crisp. So my hope is that it's just limited to Periscope. I'm just going to go to my YouTube URL and see if there's what's looking there. Yeah, it's pretty good on YouTube as well. Now maybe it's just. Let's see. Let's go to Periscope. Bum, bum, bum. I really want like the stream quality to be good enough so that you can actually see what I'm doing. Yeah, it looks okay for me on Periscope as well, Paul. So hopefully it's not on my end, but if anybody else is watching, I don't think anybody is right now, but if anybody is watching and they notice the quality isn't up to scratch, just please do let me know and I can dig in deeper and have a look. But from where I'm sitting, looking at the three platforms, all does look okay. So yeah. The only thing I'd suggest, Paul, is maybe try my Twitch stream. So twitch.tv/Joe Lennon. The quality might be better there. So yeah. Right. Jumping back in. Let's see. I'm just going to close down all of these streams because it is going to affect the quality if I have them all open at the same time. Right. So let's see. What were we doing? We were after rebuilding the database, so I need to create my sample user again. So let's just do this. Okay, so I'm forever now going to be known as Fern Grady. So let me log in. I'm logged in as Fern Grady. Hello world. And sure enough, there we go. I mean, I'm going to just create some posts. So if we say factory app post 50 create, that should create 50 sample posts. We reload the screen and yeah, sure enough, there we go. Okay, so we have our new column added to the users table, but obviously there's nothing in there right now, right? So we're going to need to create a way for us to actually update the user record for my currently logged in user. Let me see. Let's go close this down. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually create a new route to get us to that particular screen. So if I jump to, this is a problem with only working on this project like a maximum of 2 hours a week and then taking a week off, is that I completely forget all the context about where everything is and all of that kind of thing. So excuse me as I try and like refamiliarize myself with where everything is. But so we have a router.jsx file, and in here is where we are keeping the routes for the project. So in here right now we have two routes. We have our route, and we also have this individual post one. So what we're going to do is essentially create a new one called profile, and let's load up a profile component on that one. Obviously that profile component doesn't exist yet, so we're going to need to create it. So when we save, we'll get, yeah, so the app will stop working. We look at DevTools, we'll see profile is not defined. So let's go ahead and create something. So interestingly, oh, much better. That's good to hear. So I don't know, Paul, if you switched over to Twitch or what you're watching on, but glad it's working better. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to continue to broadcast on Periscope. It's interesting in that, like, I definitely get the most amount of views that I get come from Periscope because I have a bit of an audience on Twitter, like nothing massive or anything, but like there's a couple of thousand people that would potentially see my tweets. Whereas on Twitch and on YouTube, like I've literally less than 10 subscribers, right? So nobody's seeing that I'm going online. So I do get people dropping in on Periscope, but the average view time is really low. Whereas people are kind of randomly finding me on Twitch, and they are the ones who tend to like drop into the chat and you know get immersed a little bit more than people coming in on Periscope. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure I'll keep doing it on Periscope, especially if there's issues with quality. But we'll see how things go. So yeah, so let's jump back. So we need to create this profile component. So I have everything so far is within here in this components directory. So my post screen is in there. If I just jump back to app, we'll see I have navigation and everything outside of that, which is fine. So let's see if we import, let's say we'll import profile from components profile. Now I'm probably at the point where I should start extracting like screen level components out into maybe a separate containers folder within my directory structure, but for now I'm just going to leave it as is and make some progress. So let's create a new profile.jsx file in the components directory. Let's import React and export, we'll say profile and whoops, export default profile. Now I know it's like, it might seem ridiculous that I actually type out this stuff all the time, but and I know I could like use some shortcuts and all of that kind of thing, but there's something about the kind of muscle memory of doing it that I actually quite enjoy. So I tend to type these things out a bit more. So yeah, I should definitely have a shortcut for like importing React and building out a scaffolded file, but I don't do it often enough to warrant not typing it right now, I don't think anyway. So let's see. So we've got our profile here. We're importing it from the router. So the page is now loading, which is good. So if we go to /profile, sure enough, we see that profile screen, right? There's not much going on in it right now, but we can fix that pretty easily by, let's see, container mx auto. And let's add a little bit of margin to the top just to give it a bit of breathing space. And in here, then we can obviously add all of our functionality that we need to allow somebody to edit their profile. There's one thing I want to do though before I get into the nuts and bolts of how edit profile is actually going to work, and that's just adding the option to the navigation bar. So if we jump back to the router .jsx file, in here, no, sorry, I need to go back up to the app.jsx file. So this is where I have my navigation within this nav component. So in here, you'll see I've got a link to the root of the project, which is the Retrosumo. I'm slow to call it a logo, but let's just say the branding for the project as it stands right now is a link back to the root. Root. And then over on the right hand side, if we have a user ID, it shows a logout button. If we don't have a user ID, it shows a root or a link to the login route. So what we need to do is essentially, when they're logged in, so if they have a user ID, show a my profile link over here as well. So what I'm going to do is, we have a button here, so let's add a link. Now I know I'm going to need to use, I can use a link, but what I want to do is, if we're on the screen, I want to show it like highlighted. So I'll definitely want to know the ability to know whether, or to style it differently based on whether they're currently on the screen or not. And that'll become more important as we add like more sections to the project. So let's start as we mean to continue with that one. So I'm going to pull in the nav link component from the React Router DOM project. And then within here, I'm going to add another link. Now, whether I add it within the form or not is probably not important. So let's say nav link to profile, and we will say my profile. Now, oops. Okay, so that obviously looks terrible, but it does the job of allowing us to get to the user's profile, which is something. So what I'd like to do next, first thing is obviously add a little bit of spacing, right? So it does look a little bit too tight with the button component. So what I'm going to do is, and one of the nice things that I like about Tailwind is the ability to, quickly and easily add some margin or padding onto a component, and then on the container add some negative margin or padding to basically cancel out the effect of having the spacing add on both sides of each item. So what I want to do is I essentially want to add some margin between any button that appears up in this navigation bar. Now I could say, oh, the logout is always going to be the last item in the nav bar, so I should always have like no margin on the right of that. But then if I ever wanted to move the logo for whatever reason over to the left, I'd now have a problem, and I'd now need to go back and change that. So a nice thing that Tailwind allows us to do is just basically say something like this, where we'll say, let's add, I'm just going to start with with MX4. So that's 4 levels of horizontal margin. And I'll do the same on the logout. And when we do that, we should see both of them jump over a little bit. But if we inspect, we'll see there's just one thing that, again, it's not massively important, but it bugs the hell out of me. And that is that when we look at this logo button, it has some margin on the right, which means it's not actually sitting like flush with the container. So it's actually outside of that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have it sit flush. So what we can do to make that happen is we can say, okay, on the container of those items, let's say negative margin of 4. And sure enough, it shifts back over. So now it's sitting flush with the container. So if I mouse over the container here, you'll see the blue, it's nice and flush, just like the Retrosumo logo is on the left-hand side. So yeah, so I'm much happier with that. I seem to have a semi-bold font on the item. Now, what I'd like to do is, instead of doing it like that, let's take that off so that they both have equal weight. And what I can do is, like, firstly, logo will never be active, right? So I don't need to worry about the state of that. But one of the reasons that I'm using this nav link component instead of just the standard link component is that I can differentiate the styling of this based on whether it's the active root or not. So within here, I think it's active class name. Yeah. So within active class name, I can do things like this. I can say text blue 600. And when I'm on that screen, you can see it's highlighted in blue. And I can add font semi-bold or medium or whatever it is that I want to add, and add a bit of weight to it. So you can see when I'm not on it, it's just in the standard text, and when I'm on it, then it's highlighted in that blue and with the heavier font. I would like to de-emphasize the nav bar a little bit. So let's just try maybe text gray 800. Yeah, so it's really subtle, but it's just a kind of a softer, rather than it being black, it's just a little bit softer, without it being like hard to read or anything like that. So yeah, that's step one, right? So that's our logout, our profile navbar link in place. So the next thing we want to do is add a form in here that allows me to edit my profile. So let's jump into that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's make this a heading. So we'll make it a heading, but it's not going to have any impact right now because Tailwind basically clears all styles by default. So with this, we'll likely extract this into like a page title component that'll appear in maybe a specific page type of component down the line. But for now, I just want to make sure that it looks half decent. So I'm going to make the text. Let's try 2XL and see how that looks. Yeah, it's not bad. I'm going to change to say my profile, and let's add a border on the bottom, And let's add a bit of padding on the bottom as well to just give it a bit of breathing space, as well as some margin underneath that as well. And the border color could probably be a little bit darker. So I'm going to say gray 600 and see how that looks. That's too dark. Okay, let's try 400. Probably, do you know what? I'm going to just give it a little bit of pink and we'll see how that looks. Yeah, sure, why not? And actually, I should do the same on the navbar. Like, I've been kind of going with this pink color scheme up until now, so it doesn't really make any sense to be using blue in here. So let's make this pink instead. Cool. Okay, so let's add some more. Now, obviously, look, what I'm doing here isn't necessarily going to be the final styles for this screen or anything like that. I want to just get the basic mechanics and functionality in place before we do anything further. So let's continue, and I'm just going to hide the sidebar for a second to give us a bit more space to work with. So the first thing is, okay, what have we got in our profile right now that is pretty straightforward to edit? I mean, the simple example of that, I think, is our name, right? So we can allow a user to edit their name pretty easily. So let's go and add the option to do that and just get the basics of this profile screen up and running. So if we add a new, let's say we're going to add a form anyway for starters. And then we're going to add, let's add a label. And within that label, we can add, let's say, a span with the actual text that we want to appear. So I'm going to say name, and then we can have like an input component, which will have a class of, let's see, so border, shadow inner, rounded, large, padding x of 2 and py1. Let's see how that looks. And we'll format it, and let's see. Okay, so it looks terrible, but yeah, I mean, okay, there's a couple of things that we need to do. Like, we need to say focus outline none and focus shadow outline, which will hopefully give us a nice rounded effect. That's nice. And then we also want this to be auto-focused on this screen. So autofocus, and if I close DevTools and reload the screen, sure enough, there it is. So the next thing I want to do is I would like to have this appear above the input. So let's do this. Let's make this a flex component, but flex column instead. Place some, no, what am I doing? Just make it a block. Oh, sure, I'm using a span, so let's make those a div. Yeah, okay. So interestingly, my autofocus wasn't working. I think it might be related to browser sync more than anything else. So okay, so that's a starting point. I want to make this look a little bit better. I should make this class name as well instead of class. So let's go with a softer, like gray 600, uppercase, tracking, whitest, and text small. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's a bit better. It's probably a little bit too gray, and let's just bump that up a little bit. Okay, and the last thing is adding a little bit of margin on the bottom as well. So let's say margin bottom 2 might be too much. Yeah, I think maybe 1 is enough. Okay. So the other thing is it's probably a little tight on the top. And again, like this isn't like by any stretch of the imagination a final design or anything like that, but let's assume this label component is going to be the standard kind of container for form fields. So I'm just going to add a bit of vertical margin on that. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the input field itself take up full width, which is going to look terrible here. But for me, when you're styling an input component, or when you're styling like forms and things like that, you don't want the like the actual form fields themselves to be dictating things like width and all of that kind of stuff. I'd much prefer to use like a container around this to constrain width or to, you know, add columns or rows or whatever I want to do, than actually put the styling on the form field itself. So that's why I'm putting in this kind of width full here. We can also put in a placeholder. So let's say placeholder is equal to enter your name. Okay, that's starting to look a little bit better now, which is good. So the next thing we would want is a button. So, and all of these, of course, right now are like hard-coded components into the form. You can see straight away some good opportunities for extracting into React components for like a text field, for a field in general, for a form. You know, so we'll come back and actually extract these down into components at a later point. But for now, let's just keep moving and get some more features in here. So we have buttons in the project in a few places. So I'm not sure if I've already extracted that. It doesn't look like I have. So in form, do I have a button component? I don't. So okay, so I think like if we go back to the main feed, we'll see I have a post button. I'm using that in probably a couple of places. If I post something here, when I press edit, we have a button here for post or for saving as well, and that's essentially the style that I want to have for this button in here. So I think it's time for us now to extract that into a component. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. So into form, no, not in form. Into post, and let's have a look for button. Let's see what we've got here. So we've got a submit button class, and okay, so let's take this as our starting point. We're going to need to bring over some state with this as well. So if we bring this over, we'll see if it should be disabled, then yeah, so we've got like a prop in here that's like specifying if it's valid or not, and then we have a class name which is being built up using the class names library. So what do we want to do? So the is valid is that's the only thing that's determining whether how this actual one should work. So I'm just gonna, for now, we're probably gonna, we're gonna need state and stuff like that in here as well. So let's return this rather than having it as a implicit return, and let's say const is valid is equal to false, and let's do that. Okay, so something's broken, and it's because we're not importing class names, I'm pretty sure. Just double check. Submit button classes, that's fine. Okay, so two problems. So import class names from class names, and then we also need to bring this over, which I thought we had, but we haven't. And do that, save. Okay, so that's working. A couple of issues. So the first thing is the text of the button is like hard coded to post. So I think we're kind of at a point now where it makes sense for us to like immediately like break this out into a separate component. So I don't think it belongs in the form component, because like buttons can have many different different states. I mean, you could have a submit button, you could have a regular button, you could have a link button. There's like so many different options that you can potentially have for these type of buttons. So I'm going to create a brand new button component, and in here we're going to import React from React, and let's export const button, and we'll be putting some props in here, and we will probably want to do some logic inside here as well, and let's export default button. The reason I'm exporting it like this as well is that we may want to have like a link button or, you know, a submit button or something, some different kind of exports that can be imported to render this button in a different state. So we may end up like, you know, bringing this just down to a local component and having a few super components over it that dictate how this works, but we'll address that later. So we're definitely going to need text, and we're going to need to know if it should be disabled or not. Beyond that, right now, I don't think we need anything, because we're just going to assume that it's a submit button. But we would over time need to add things like on click, or you might want to allow it to have child components in it rather than just necessarily text. So if you wanted an icon on it and things like that, rather than just passing through text, you might want to pass through children into the button component, and then render those inside the component itself. For now, let's just keep it really, really simple, and let's extract this into here. So disabled will be basically the value of this prop, but we're going to default it to false. And then class name is going to be submit button classes. Okay, so let's see. With that, I think we can probably say button class name. And let's see. So, and with this one, we need text in here. And I'm actually just going to default the text to submit, so that if we don't pass any text into it, that it'll show submit. So the last thing we need to do is just get this class name working. So what I want to do here is extract this logic out of here and add it into this button component. We can say button class name, and instead of basing it on whether it's valid or not, we'll say it should have a hover if it's not disabled, and it should have those if it is disabled, right? So that is that. So next, let's come back in here and we can take this out and instead say import button from button. And I'm gonna import it this way just because I may change how that works in the not too distant future. And then instead of what we had before, we now have button, and we'll have disabled is equal to not is valid, and we will have text is equal to save. And let's leave it at that for now. If we save, it's not working. Class names is not defined. Interesting. Oh, I thought I imported that, but obviously not. From class names, let's see. Okay, so we're getting there. So enter your name. So yeah, the autofocus, it always trips me up with browser sync for some reason. If it's obviously not reloading everything or something, so you don't get the autofocus. Or if you've DevTools open and DevTools has focus, the autofocus sometimes doesn't kick in on the actual page. So I always tend to go back and check that. One thing's kind of annoying me, and I think it's because I'm using kind of a soft enough around the corner here on these items that it just feels too harsh or too soft or something on the round the corner. So I'm just going to bump the rounding down to kind of a minimum rounding, which is really soft and subtle, but anyway, that's fine. So with that done, there's a couple of things. The first thing is to come back here and say, okay, well, now we don't necessarily need to have this button work this way. So we can say button disabled is equal to is valid, and text is equal to post. And we should get rid of this. And similarly, we should get rid of these submit button class items here. But we do need to bring in the button component from here. So if we say button, import button from button. So now when we go back to this, we should still have our post form, which is great. And the other place we want to look is, let's see if there's any other references to button. We have a cancel button, which I'm going to leave there for now, but this one is obviously a prime candidate to be replaced as well. So we're going to say button disabled is not as valid, and we're going to say text is equal to save. And let's continue our search. So we've got an edit button, no, edit and delete. They're again different styles again. So we'll come back to them. I'm really focused just on submit buttons for now. So that's cool. Right, so if we save that, just make sure we haven't broken anything in the process. Everything seems to still work. Hello one, save. Yeah, we're fine. Okay, so let's jump back to the edit or to my profile screen. Okay, so the next thing I want to get working here is that when you actually come to the screen, firstly it should populate your name in here for you, and then obviously when you click on the save button, it should persist your changes to the server, so we need to create an API endpoint to handle that. So yeah, we're definitely making a little bit of headway, but probably a bit slower than I had hoped. But anyway, so let's go. Name. So the first thing we need to do is get the name populating in here. Now, I could bring the name in from the context, and that's probably the way I should do it, because if I update the name on the user's profile, we probably should go and update context as well, so that, you know, anytime I come in and see the person's name, it should be updated across the board without me having to do a refresh anywhere. So so that's interesting. So like the other approach that we could take is that we could have an API call in this component that would go and fetch the user's details, and then obviously when you save it, it calls an API as well. But instead, we should probably just pull this from context. So we already have a user context, I believe. Yeah. So we should be able to bring that in. So if we import user context from, let's say, contexts user, and let's bring in use context. Like a sidebar for now. And then in here, let's say above this, we're going to say user is equal to use context user context. And then we could say extract name from the user, right? Obviously we'll be putting avatar and some other information on there soon, but for now let's do that. And then in here, we're going to get pretty close to extracting this pretty soon as well, but there's a couple of things that we would want to do. Okay, now, yeah, okay, I'm immediately thinking there's going to be a couple of issues here, right? So the first thing we want to do is we're going to need use state. So I'm not sure this is necessarily what we want to do, is to actually put this, we might want to put this into an effect and only have it happen when the component mounts, rather than doing it like this, because I'm thinking if we say name and set name is equal to use state empty string, then essentially what we'll have is in here we'll have value is name, and on change is set name to the value of that field, right? So as they change it, it'll update the state. And then what we want is, if we use effect up here, I'm not even sure we can use context within an effect, we'll have to see. So if we use effect, and then we only want this to happen when the component mounts, we'll say const user is equal to use context user context. We could say current const name is current name, or something like that. And then we could say set name to current name. Let's see if that works. Nope. Okay, there are multiple modules with, Right, let's look at our error here. There are multiple modules with names that only differ in casing. Okay, that's weird. Apologies. So I've been using uppercase context here, which is incorrect. It's a little problem though. So let's see. Yeah, so this is what I was afraid of. So hooks can only be called inside the body of a function component. So let's extract this out and put it up here. And maybe we don't need the effect. Maybe instead what we can say is use state current name, and then actually just let's comment it out for now. No, so that's not working. Okay, that's console.log name. I'm guessing it's null. Undefined. Of course it is. Current name is also undefined. Right. Let's log the context itself. ID 1. Ah, well, that would explain a lot. Okay, so we're not actually passing the name on the context right now. So if we have a look back up at the top level on the app.jsx, we'll see, okay, so we're bringing in user ID, but we're not actually bringing in any other information about the user. So we can change that pretty easily. If we go back up to index.js, this is where we're bringing the information in from our document and adding it on. So if I go to index.blade.php, I thought it would be index.blade. That's blade.php, app.blade.php. Okay, nope, that's not it either. Blade.php home. Yeah. Okay, so right now we have it in as a user ID. So what we could do is we could change this to basically be something like this instead, where we say, okay, instead of having it in double quotes, we have it in single quotes, and we say JSON, and it's going to be what? User. What did we have? Auth ID. And we could have request user. Okay, so that's going to break something unexpected. Okay, we need another bracket, and let's reload. Okay, so cannot read property get attribute of null, which is fine. So we go back to our index.js. Actually, let's just have a quick look at the source and make sure it's actually feeding through. So we go to elements, head. Yeah, sure enough, the JSON is feeding through, which is good. So if we now come to our index.js file, so in here, instead of getting user ID, what we're going to say is we're going to let user, and then we will, okay, so we're parsing the user ID. We don't need to do that anymore. Might create a problem for us in another area, but for now, let's just focus on doing this. So we're going to want to parse the JSON that's included in that attribute. So let's do this. And then let's pass the user through instead, which means when we come into our app.jsx, instead of bringing in user ID, we want to bring in user, and then we can in here say parse int user.id, like that, which isn't necessarily what we need to do either, right? So if we go, so the value should just be what comes through from the user object. So we do that, and now we have a user context with an entire user in it. So reference our current name is not defined. Okay, so if we go back to profile, and we say name is current name. Ah, okay, for Grady, perfect. We might have some issues elsewhere. Surprisingly not, it looks okay. So we can edit, we can say hello 1, 2, save, reload, delete. Yeah, it looks like it's working, and it's not tripping up on comparisons or anything like that for showing edit and delete buttons. Hello world. Yeah, it seems to work fine. So, and then we've got the name feeding in here, which is great. So name and set name, use state current name is valid, is false. Now, so what we'll do here is we'll put in a nice, so we'll change is valid to instead be a piece of state. So we're going to say set is valid, and we're going to say use state is false, because it should be false by default. And then what we'll say is we can put in that when the name state changes, that we want to update the validity, right? So we're going to say set is valid to name.length is greater than 0 and name is not equal to current name. And let's see how that works. So for Grady 1, perfect. Okay, so that works quite well. So that's bringing back the current name and updating it. Now, there's a couple of things that we want to do. So firstly, when they submit the save here, so what we're going to want is basically have an onSubmit on the form that basically does something. So let's create a submit method where we will essentially prevent default for starters. And then we are going to want to call an API. So let's say save user or something like that, right? And then we can have a save user, which should be an async method. And in here, we'll have a try catch. We'll just console error for now if there's a problem. And in here, so we'll call API to save user record, and once it's done, we should update the context. Right? And is that it? I mean, I think it is. We probably want to, like, so if I come in like this, you can see, so if I save that and then I call the API to save that and then I update the context, then we need to make sure that the current name here is updated as well from context. I'm not sure if that happens automatically. It probably should, but we'll double check that. So essentially the state should change so that this is now grayed out essentially until I make another change again. So let's get this wired up. So the first thing we need to do is what? So we'll want to, let's see, const response is equal to await. Okay, so do we have an API standard? We don't. So we're just going to use Axios directly for now. So import Axios from Axios. Because I think that's what we're doing. So if I jump over to my post.jsx, Axios, let's have a look. Yeah, okay. So it seems that we're just going directly to Axios right now. So what are we doing? We're saying await Axios dot, what are we doing? We're updating a user. So we're going to be replacing the entire user object with whatever we passed through, I guess, as opposed to patching it. Yeah, okay. Let's start off with a put anyway. So if we say put users and we want to pass through the name for now, and let's just console.log response for now, and we'll update more on that later. So that's fine. We go to elements. What am I doing? Console.log. There's no console.log coming through. We say, yeah, save, method not allowed. Makes sense because we don't have the roots yet, right? So if I close, let's see, close others, and let's open up our api.php. So in here, we have these roots at the moment, and this will definitely be an authenticated root. So let's add it in within this particular group. And we're going to say root put users. Let's say user controller at update. Yeah, okay. So let's do that, and then we'll probably need to create that controller. So if we exit here, let me say make controller user controller. Now I'm not going to make it a resourceful one or anything like that because we'll just create the methods as we need them. But let's see, we've got user controller. I just want to have a quick peek at our controller setup here. Yeah, that's fine. So let's go into that. And let's say public function update. We'll take in the request object as a parameter here. So in here we should be, validating and all that kind of good stuff. But basically what we want to do is we want to get the current user, update the user, and then return new updated user. Right? So we'll say user is equal to request user. So that's going to get the currently logged in user. We can say user update, and essentially we could pass in a request object, but let's just go and do some validation instead. So we can say data is request, no, it's this validate, pass in a request object, and then a rules array. In the rules array, we're going to say name is required. Let's just give it a min of, say, 4. Just an arbitrary number for now, but anyway. And then we get the current user. So if this isn't passed through, then we don't do anything. It's already an authenticated function, so we're checking that the user is authenticated. So we should always have a user here. And then we want to update that user with the data that's come through. And by using this validation, we're basically limiting the fields that are going to be passed into this method here to whatever's in the validation object, right? So, or in the validation rules array. So the only thing that'll be passed through will be name. So as long as name is updatable or fillable on the user method, which it is, we can pass it through in this manner, which will update the user. And then finally, we'll just return the user. So that should be our API method. Now we really need to write a test and things for that, but I'm just conscious of time. I'm 55 minutes already, so let's just crack on and get this wired up, because right now we're not even, it doesn't even look like we're going to get anywhere close to getting even avatars in here in this session. So it's amazing how much longer it takes to go through this stuff when you're talking out loud, but yeah, let's see. Okay, so let's see what happens by just observing the network tab here, reloading, and let's see. So if we say, I want to change my profile, so I'm going to say my name is actually Joe Lennon. All right, we still have a problem. So the put method is not supported for this route. Supported methods get, head, etc. So what's it trying to call? Localhost 3000/users. Oh, sorry. It should be API/users. So I'm getting close to extracting Axios into its own like separate file here, so that I can easily just, things like API prefix everything by default, and like set headers and all sorts of things that need to happen on every request. Like you can do that at a higher level. I don't think I'm doing that anywhere at the moment. Am I adding stuff onto Axios at any point? I don't think so, which is interesting. I would have expected I'd have to for some functionality, but anyway, let's just crack on. So now that I've added that, I can try again. And sure enough, I get a 200 OK. And if I look at the response, you can see my newly updated name is here in that response, which is great. So yeah, happy with that. What I want to do now, obviously, is then say, okay, well, within that response, let's see what we need. So we've got data. So it's actually, so we could say data is updated user, like that. And then, so what we're looking to do is console.log updated user, but we're actually not. We're going to update context with updated user, right? So that's what we need to do next. And we also should show a toast message saying, yeah, this worked, right? So what's our toast component doing exactly? Not that one. If we go back to the post, and let's see. So we've got use toasts and add toast. Interesting. So we're doing this here, which is probably something we should be doing at a higher level again. So we'll need to extract that out. But look, let's bring something in nice and quickly, because we're running out of time fast. So we can tidy this up later, but let's get something working for now. So if I cancel that, bring that back, and import use toasts, and let's see, how else were we bringing that in? So toast comes in here like this, bring it down here, and for now, I'm just gonna basically call add toast with some options on it. So in here, we'll update the context, and then we'll basically do this. So we'll say message My mouse has decided to stop working for some reason. Your profile was saved successfully. Yeah. Okay, so let's say Joe Lennon becomes Barney Stinson. Custom options is not defined, so we definitely don't need to worry about that. And yeah, let's just call that one options for now. Let's check in notification. So let's just pass through options. Boom. Try again. Ted Mosby. Save. Your profile was saved successfully. Perfect. So the last thing we need to do here is just update context. So that is. Just can't help myself. Right. So update context but updated user. Now I actually we'll need to probably dig into some docs here to figure out, okay, we want to update context. So let's see. If we go to the React context, hook, update, and let's see. Beginner guide to React context API. So hopefully there's something nice in here about updating context, which would be nice. You stay, you clicked on count X times. That's fine. Passing data via prompts. No. Okay, managing state with hook and context API. So right. Update delivery status, set state, delivery status delivered. Interesting. So that would suggest that at the top level, we should be managing state or our user context and then passing through a component to change it, which is interesting. So, okay, let's see. Like that kind of makes sense how they're doing it there, but I would like to just see if there is a way of using the use context to update. Okay, let's see. Context one provider, that's fine, we have that already. That's our context. Okay, so they have a reducer method here, which is interesting. So that reducer is equal to that. That's the context one provider. We're using a use reducer. So if you use, yeah. So I'm familiar with reducers from Redux. So you return a state object, blah blah blah. Okay. This feels a little overkill what we're trying to do, but it'll probably be where we'll need to go ultimately. But I don't want to rebuild Redux or anything like that. So let's see, we'll go one more. Payment screen currency. Classic block drilling. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so they're saying reducers. So reducers is the way we need to go by the looks of it. Okay. Export store provider responsible for making it, etc. etc. Okay. Use reducer. Let's see. We need to create reducer file. My fear here is I'm getting into full-on Redux, but maybe that's what I need to be doing at this point. Let's see. React will stay with context and hooks. Go away, medium. Whose value is the store, aka the map. Using to access, read, modify, and delete values from the store. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're getting to with this. You don't have to write or deeply understand these code and read it, etc. Wrap your React app with the function with store. So they're using HOCs. I prefer to keep it a little simpler if we can here. So, okay. Let's go to the React docs and just see, is there like the bare minimum implementation of context that we could use here? So updating context from a nested component. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to do, right? So team context is create context team, and then toggle team is that. Okay, so where are we using? Okay, let's bring up our user context. So create context, and right now we're actually not passing anything into this. Okay, so what we should be doing is passing in some information in here, I think. So we could pass in like user is null, and then set user is something like this, right? Let's see, so toggle team, Context uses reference. Object is always created for a value to get around this. Lift the value into the parent state. Okay, just gonna have to pause for a second. I need to leave the dogs out. Let's see. Okay, back again. Let's see. So what are we doing? We want to add some things into context. So let's see. We're talking about setting state at the top level and then passing that down to the provider. Okay. And this is updating the context from a nested component. So in this case, you can pass a function down through the context that allow consumers to update the context, which makes sense. And then in your button, you toggle it, you change it, and then at the top level, you store the state. I don't understand, like if we have it on the top level app container, and why are we adding it here as well? Make sure the shape of the default value passed to create context matches the shape that the consumers expect. Okay, so this is really just to set it. So what that means then is at the app level, in here, we need to now use state. So let's bring in use state from React. And in here, we're basically saying const user set user is equal to use state user. Yeah. Let's say user is, we'll call it something else. So current user maybe, and then pass that in here. And on the context here, then what we're saying is we're going to pass in value user is user, and then set user is set user. Like, kind of smells to me. But it's the only thing I can think of. So, that should break things considerably here. Yeah, cannot read properly length of undefined. So what are we doing? Set user instead of. So yeah, we're nesting the user within there as opposed to it being at the top level, which means now within our anywhere we're reading that, it's going to be a problem, right? So if we go to profile, possibility to type today. So if we bring in, okay, so let's bring in user from the context like that, and also set user. Then what we're saying is it's user.name is the context there, and then essentially what we'd be saying is set user to updated user. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. Let's see. It's still broken. Current name is not defined. So where's, oh yeah, okay. So user.name. Interesting. So Ted Mosby. So if we say, I want to go back to Barney Stinson now and press save, profile would save successfully, but I'm not sure if that's actually followed through. So if we go to not network, let's go to components and let's see on app user, it's still Ted Mosby. Right, okay, so const user set user is equal to use context user context. Like that seems to still be working, but obviously set user just isn't available. I wonder what is wrong with that. So if we go to app here, we've got value is set user. I wonder if we put in like update user is equal to, and then just console.log user. No, not user. Updated user. Like I wonder is that actually even getting called, right? So if we, instead of passing set user down, pass this down, and we update our user context to say update user. And then in here, we say, instead of doing this, that we have an update user method. And in here, we call update user. Okay, so let's say we're going to go back to Joe Lennon, press save. Oh, okay, so it's doing it, like it's past, it's. So in here then, like what should be able to happen is if I set user to updated user, then does that not update the provider, no? So if I'm saying, okay, I'm going to go back to Ted Mosby, no. It's not updating. So it's updating the state, Oh, okay, because I'm looking at the props, right? So what I actually need to look at is the provider. So which is the outer one? User provider. Okay, so children, host provider, value. Okay, so the value is updated to Ted Mosby, which is good. But the state isn't ringing true here, right? So if I go back here, it's up. Okay, so I need to fix my nav bar anyway, right? So if I come in here, you'll see a couple of things are broken. So let's fix those. I think I'm getting there, but let's see. So user ID is, yeah. So let's see if we say we want to bring out user, and let's say user and, right? So let's just do that instead, and let's say not user. Show login instead. Perfect. So if I log out, yeah, log in, and Joe at example password. Perfect. So what I'm actually going to do is, rather than just showing log out, I'm actually going to say, or sorry, rather than showing this here, I'm going to instead print out the username. Okay, so then when I change this to Barney Stinson, it'll be interesting to see if this actually updates. Huh, it does. Okay, so it's updating, but in here, the state of our form isn't updating. I wonder if I go one. Huh, interesting. Okay, so I need to actually make one more fix, which is on my post.jsx screen. All right, let's see. Where are we wrapping the user call? Here. So we want to say extract user from the context, and then let's find any references to user ID. So we're saying user and show the form, and let's say user ID. Can edit as well. So let's say user is user dot. Oh crap. Okay. Let's see, current user comes in like that, and then we can say current user.id is equal to user ID, which we should now see. Yeah, and again, boom, working, save, reload, delete. Okay, working. Hey everyone, post Barney Stinson. Go into the Barney Stinson page, change this to Ted Mosby, save it. Ted Mosby updates here, come back into Retrosumo, Ted Mosby, edit, cancel. Cool. All right, so the last step is to get this working, where that will update the state of the validity of the button as soon as we save the profile. So, right, so we're saying set is valid based on the name here. So can we also do this based on user changing? Let's see. So if we say Ted Mosby, save, haha, boom, done, perfect. Okay, so that's it. So we now have that updating across the board, and we also have it updating the state of the save button as soon as we've changed our profile. So that's the basic mechanics of the profile screen done. The next thing we need is avatars. So let's, what time is it? It's coming up to 5:20. Might not have quite enough time to get a really good solution in place for this one, but let's try and get something in place at the very least, right? So if we go back to the user controller, so right now we have a name coming through. So I also want to say avatar, and this is nullable, but if we do have it, it should be an image. So let's do that. So that shouldn't stop me from like changing this to Ted Mosby. It shouldn't give me any errors. And obviously validation and all that kind of stuff is things that we'll need to add on here later as well. So that's fine. So that's still working. Again, I need to come back and write tests and all that stuff. So yeah, this is going to take ages. But let's come in here and, okay, we need to extract this into a component. But for now, let's just create another component in a similar guise. So we'll say class name is MB1 text grade 700 uppercase. I should have just copied it. Tracking widest text small, and we will say avatar. And then we'll have an input. This one will have a type of file, and we'll do what exactly? We'll say on change. Let's just have an input type file and see what that looks like for starters. Okay, so it looks terrible, but that's fine. So what we want to do is we want to save this file in state somehow, right? So if we say in here, so avatar, so avatars are a little different, right? In that we're gonna have, let's say there's no value on this. So let's just put it as an empty state for now. And like, we're not going to pass through the actual avatar path. We're going to need to pass through like a file object that can be stored, and then that's put in a path, and then that path is saved to the database. So it's a little bit different to like just updating the name. We can't just like pass through the new name and have that come through. And there's a little bit more to it than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say avatar here, and then on, yeah, let's be naive here and just say on change key set avatar to e.target dot what is it, files 0 or something like that, right? I'm pretty sure that's not it, but anyway, let's see what happens. So choose file, and do I even have an avatar in here? I do not. Do you know what? Let's go to my Twitter profile and get one. So save image. Save image as, and avatar.jpg. Close those two now, and then in here, let's go to downloads. Okay, so we can't save it because, so let's just change my name here, and that'll allow us to save it. We'll need to fix the validation there shortly, but we should get an error, 422 unprocessable entity, which is interesting. So let's have a look at what's actually been passed through. So the given data was invalid, the avatar must be an image, which makes sense. And as you can see, we're not actually passing through anything for the avatar here, which is kind of makes sense. So there's a couple of things. The first thing I want to do is form ink type, multi-part form data. I'm not sure that's necessarily going to help all that much, but let's see. So I don't think that's going to change anything yet. So when I look at it, headers is still, of course it is, right? Because that doesn't matter. What we actually need to do is when we're sending the avatar through here, we need to send it in a different way. So we need to say const form data is equal to new form data, I believe. And then what we can say is form data.name is equal to name, and form data.avatar is equal to avatar. And then instead of passing this through, we can pass through form data, I think. I could be wrong there, but let's see how we go with that. So Joe Lennon. Let's choose a file, let's choose the avatar, let's save, so 422, and it's not passing through anything at all, which is interesting. Let me just check some notes that I have. Handling avatars. So, I think there's a few things that we need to do differently. So first, I actually think I'm doing this is wrong. So I think it needs to be something like form data dot, yeah, append, and then give it a name of name, and then same with the avatar. So I think with the avatar, we may need to be a bit cleverer than what we're doing right now, right? So if we'll log that out in a second because that's probably not going to work. I think the other thing we need to do is add a third option here with some headers and content type with multi-part form data, something like that. Okay, so let's see how that looks. I'm still not expecting that to work, but let's see. So choose file, avatar, save, 422, still the same problem, but what's coming through? Name, and then a binary for avatar. That's interesting. The file. Bum, bum, bum. Save. No. File uploads. They're just so much fun. Okay, so let me have a quick look. I will need to do this probably a little bit differently. So I think when the user selects a file, I think I'm probably handling it a bit badly there right now. So I think in here, we probably need to do something a little bit more complicated than this. So let's just say on select file, right? And then in here, let's have another event saying const on select file is equal to E, and then do that. And then I think you will need to extract the file off the event, right? So I think the easiest thing we can do is say files is equal to e.target, and I'm pretty sure we should have a reference to the files in here. So let's just do that for starters, right? So then if we go in, choose file, avatar, we should get something in the console. Yeah, so file list, right? So if files.length is greater than 0, then the selected file is files 0. And if we console.log out that, sure enough, we have the file, right, and all of the metadata around it as well. So you can see the name, the type, etc., but that's not what we actually need. So if we say const, no, if we say set avatar, and then we say file selected file, like that, what happens? So if we do this, use and do this, pass through. I need to change the name as well. Let's give it something real. Save, still 422. Now it's passing through an object. Okay. And that's because we're trying to submit the actual object to the server, of course we are. So now if we change this to say avatar.file, let's see, save 422. Binary. Given data. The name field is required. Ah. Interesting. So it's not passing through the name now. How does that make sense? So we're appending it here. We're saying it's multi-part form data. Please tell me that wasn't it. And Joe Lennon, save. Nope. The name field is required. The name field is in there. What? Oh, this is very frustrating. Let me have a quick look in. I have a similar project to this somewhere. Oh, hang on. I think I know what this is. So, yeah, so I put these in as put requests, right? So if we come in and we say API.php, I'm pretty sure there's a problem with PHP and put requests, which sounds ridiculous, but I'm pretty sure when they're multi-part form data, they don't really work that well. So let me just try this. So if I try changing this to a post and then do the same thing again, does it actually get me any further? Oh, you gotta love it. Yeah, so that works. Right. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is if it's actually passed through to the server, then we're going to need to do something with the avatar. Okay, so we can update the data like that. But what we're going to say is if the request has a file with the name avatar, then what we will do is we will say, let's say the avatar itself is avatar get on the request object, and so now we need to figure out where we're going to store it. So for now, let's just say location is images, avatars, and let's actually put in the user ID or users and pass through the user ID as well, just to namespace it somewhat. And then what we want to do is we want to say image is equal to, and image, let's say avatar is equal to, no. Oh, okay, avatar path is equal to no, avatar store. Yeah, avatar store, and then let's say location. No type hinting. Why not? Come on. Where do we want to store it? So, I'm going to need to look up the Laravel docs quickly. How are we doing for time? Okay, I've got another 15 minutes or so, so we're not doing too badly. Request. Okay, so files. Storing upload files. So we need to pass in the disk we want to store it on. Okay, so we're going to want to actually render these avatars. So we can't just like store them on the default disk that comes with Laravel. We're going to need to do a little bit of rejigging here, right? So by default, it's going to use a local file system driver, which is fine for storing the avatars, but we actually want to use this one, the public one, because we're going to want to actually be able to show these avatars on the UI. So let's use the public disk, but we'll also want the file to be visible, and I think we need to pass in third parameter here. I can't see it here in this particular documentation, but I'm pretty sure we need to do that. And then what we can do is we can say, okay, so instead of doing this, we can say username is equal to request name, and we'll do that, and then we'll say user save, right? So what we can say here is user avatar path is equal to user story, yada yada yada, and then do that. So let's see if we come back in and say the user has an avatar, select that, let's bring him back to Barney Stinson, press save, it worked, and sure enough now we have an avatar path on the user object, which is interesting. So if we take this and we go to, haha, there it is. Okay, so that's good, that's a start. Now what? So if we reload this, obviously this is going to go away. So we need to be able to actually show that avatar in here if the user already has an avatar. So let's work on doing that, right? So the first thing we want to do is, let's see, we will go to the user.php file, and in here, let's create a new attribute, right? So let's say public function get avatar URL attribute. And in here, what we're going to do is we want to say storage URL, and then we want to say this avatar path, like that. And I think we only want to say that if we have an avatar for the user, right? Otherwise it's going to return nothing, or it might return return something we don't want it to return. So let's just say that, and then let's return null if we don't have that. Okay, so the first thing that that's going to mean is that on our user object that comes through, it's still coming through with the avatar path, but what we actually wanted to bring through is we wanted to append on the URL. And we can actually probably just add avatar path in here because we don't really care. So when we do that, we go to value user avatar URL / stores / images. Really? I don't think so. I think that's right. Let's do you know what? Let's test our theory here, right? So what we can say is in our nav link here, we can say user.avatar excuse me, URL and, or we can maybe actually say const has avatar is equal to user.avatar URL is not equal to null. And we can say, so has avatar and image source is equal to user.avatar URL, and we will need to put some classes on it, but let's just start with that. It works. Okay. Fair enough. So let's add some class names to this. Actually, we'll chuck them on the end. Actually, do we have an avatar component? No. Oh my god. Okay. Of course we don't, because we haven't been working with any avatars yet. Okay, so we're going to want to make this pretty small and rounded. And we'll also want to make the parent flex. And what? Okay. Item center. Probably a little bit bigger on the images, probably a little small. Let's try width 6 and height 6. Yeah, that's a bit better. And obviously MR2. Nice. And then we need to put, thought we had flex on that. Oh no, it's on the container. So we need to add flex onto the form as well. Boom. Okay. So that's working. So now when I update to Ted Mosby, and let's get ourselves a Ted Mosby avatar to test with. So let's go images, and if we say tool size icon, let's go with this one, save image as Ted Mosby.jpg. We can now close this, choose a file with Ted Mosby, save, boom. That works. That's nice. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we need to tidy up. The first thing is that in here, in this avatar, you can see that the state of this hasn't returned to the default. Also, what would be nice is if the user already has an avatar, that we actually show it, with maybe an option to remove it. So that's another thing that needs to be tidied up in here. And also our validation is currently broken because we can change this. So if I change this to my avatar, you see that the form still can't be submit, right? So that's obviously not very good. So if we were to do that and then press enter, yeah, okay. So they're all things that we need to tidy up. What I probably would prefer to use the time that I've left, which isn't very long, is to actually add the avatar onto the onto these components here where we're showing the update or where we're showing the posts. So let's do a couple of things. Let's firstly create a new avatar component. Profile. Could we add that on as a profile thing? Probably not. I'm just going to create it as a separate component. So let's do that. Just checking. No chat. That's fine. Import React from React. Export default and return image source is source. And for now, we're just going to hard code in those values that we had in there. I'm going to add a border as well. So I'm going to say pink 600 for now. And leave it at that. And we will need to bring source in from props, of course. And what else? So we go back to profile. Nope, we go back to our navbar. We should now be able to import avatar from components avatar. Excuse me. And then instead of having image tag, we can just say avatar source is user.avatar URL, like that, and then that. This does work the same way. Okay, it's lost the margin right too. So yeah, so what I'd like to do here is actually pass that through. So I'm going to say class name is equal to mr2 like this. Now that's not going to pass through automatically. Instead, what I'm going to have to do is go into my avatar here, and we will say class name comes through. Oops. And so what I want to do then is essentially say class name is equal to, and could just do class name like this, but that's probably not what I really want to do. So let's say const class name classes is equal to class names, and then pass in class name as well as the classes that we have in the actual component. So we'll import class names from class names. We will, what am I doing here? Let's see, get rid of this and just extract all of that and pop those in there. And then in here, we can say classes like that. Boom, works, okay. Doesn't seem to have the pink border though, and that's probably because I haven't specified that it should have a border. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now I have my avatar component. So now when I go into my post list, where do we want to see it? We want to see it on the post feed item. And so for now, what we'll do is we'll say, okay, so we've got our span here. So we'll say user is user. So let's say has avatar is equal to user.avatar URL is not equal to null. And we will say has avatar and avatar source is equal to user.avatar URL. Just leave it there for now. We need to import the avatar component, of course. So we will do this. Reload. Okay, so Ted Mosby has an avatar, so his avatar is showing. It's not showing the way we'd want it, of course. So let's see where post list item. Looking the right thing. Feed item. Sorry. So we want to put flex on this component now as well. So flex items center. Boom. And okay, so we have a new kind of issue here where these are now kind of separate, right? So we want this to have a class name of mr2, just like it does up here. But now we also have this issue where there's the gap between Ted Mosby isn't there. So I think what we need to do with that is, instead of having that outside the span, inside the span. Nope. Okay. So probably means we need to put like mr1 on that, which isn't ideal. I prefer if it was just like an actual piece of text rather than it being like a literally a margin, but that's fine. It looks okay. And that's cool. So obviously the avatar is probably a little bit small. There's plenty of things we could do to maybe improve the appearance of it, but I'm cool with what we have showing up here for now. There's a few other things that we'd like to do, so we will crack those the next day. So really, what have we got left to do? First thing is we don't have any fallback avatars. We need to sort that out. We need to have a fallback default avatar show up. I'd like the avatar when it shows up on the activity feed to show up a little bit larger than it does in the nav bar. And then also on the profile page, we need to do a couple of things. Firstly, we need to ensure that we show the avatar, the current avatar, to the user. We need to give them a way of clearing out their current avatar as well. So if they want to remove the avatar entirely and go back to the fallback, they should be able to do that if they want to. If they choose a new avatar, we should basically replace the preview avatar in place here. And also we need to fix the validation logic as well. I'd also like to apply a little bit of styling to this file input component here, and maybe add a couple of flourishes, like the ability to drag an image in here in order to update the component as well, rather than having to use the choose file dialog. One point actually that some people have asked me this before on projects, but I tend to wrap my input fields in labels. And that's just a technique that I use to make it easy to focus on the field, right? So if you've used a form, if you've used an input field and you've had a label, one of the most common ways that people do that, right, is if I just open up a new file and change the language mode to HTML, right? So one of the most common things you'll see is a label with a for name field, and we'll say name, and then you'd have a separate input component which has a type of text and a name of name and an ID of name field. And what that does is it basically binds this label to this particular input, so that when you click on the label, it'll focus the input field. It's just more of a preference thing. I prefer not to have to come up with IDs all the time if I can avoid it, especially when you're working with things like React. So a nice little shorthand for exactly this, that doesn't need any IDs to bind the label to the input, is to instead just wrap the label around the input. So you can put name like this, and then you can have your input field within the label, and then you don't need any ID. Instead, what will happen is it'll automatically bind it, because it's a descendant of the label input, or the label element itself. My voice is going. One of the common complaints about this is that it makes it harder to style, but you can basically make the label a block element and treat it like it was a div, and then essentially do whatever you want with the wrap a span around the actual label text itself and style up all you want. And I've never really had any issues with this. It works pretty well. I know Bootstrap doesn't do it this way, so I'm sure there's probably some gotchas that I'm not aware of, but personally I prefer this approach. So that's just explaining why I've gone with that approach. So yeah, so there's plenty to do, even just with what we have here. Avatar previews, option to remove an avatar, fix the validation on here, separate avatar component for updates, and then obviously fallback avatars as well. So we didn't really get through a whole lot of my list today. If I switch back over to my StreamKit tasks, let's see, I actually haven't checked any of them off. So let's see, we have edit profile screen, upload avatar, and show avatars on posts are kind of done. Not really finished yet, but we'll come back and actually tidy that stuff up next time. Based on the amount of time that took, I'm expecting that I probably need to stop trying to plan 6 things for every stream and maybe cut it down to something like 3. So I might be a little bit less ambitious with the next stream on Thursday. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. So let's just, before I finish, have a quick look and see. We've got quite a number of changes in here. So let's see, we're just going to add them all and add a new commit saying edit profile screen added, avatar starting point completed. And we'll push that up to GitHub. So if you're on GitHub now, you should see those latest changes under the Retrosumo repository. So 10 seconds ago, dismiss. There you go. So our changes are in there now. So you can go up onto GitHub and pull down that repo if you want to have a browse around the code base so far. Feel free as well to subscribe on YouTube, on Twitch. You'll find all of the previous live streams that I've done on my YouTube channel. They are on stream, or they're on Twitch as well, but they only stay there for 14 days because I don't have a Twitch Pro account right now. But yeah, if you do want to see old episodes, definitely go onto my YouTube channel. Unfortunately, because I have so few subscribers, my YouTube channel has this ridiculously awful URL right now. So please do subscribe. It'll help me get up to that 100 subscribers mark that I need in order to get a vanity URL for my YouTube channel. But for now, if you go onto my Twitter profile at twitter.com/Joe Lennon, you'll find my YouTube link in there. So yeah, anybody who was watching or is watching the playback, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. And that's it.